Borderlands 4 just dropped its first big balance patch, and it's actually a great move because the focus is improving all 4 Vault Hunters and not on nerfing some of the broken builds that have already been discovered. The devs said that their main goal was to give us more ways to build our perfect Vault Hunter, to hopefully make each one of them enjoyable and viable across all of the content available. It seems like they really want people to experiment with different combos and see what works rather than trying to balance out everything perfectly. And if you're an Amon main, then you're going to be stoked for all the changes we're going to go over later. This week's Big Encore boss is Driller Hole and Tonnage Peel in the Carcadia Burn region. This boss fight can drop the GMR Assault Rifle, Katagawa's Revenge Sniper, and Fuse Grenade, with the Katagawa's Revenge being the main draw, and this can be insane with the right Harlowe build. The Wildcard mission is Means of Ascent, giving a guaranteed Star Helix AR each run, though it's not worth grinding heavily this week in my opinion because it's not like the reward is a great drop. Maurice's Black Market Vending Machine has moved to Rattlehead Crest, which is easiest to get to from the Someday Rise safe house. Just a reminder, the location is the same for everyone, but the drops are different. You can access it again after the cooldown to try and get it to reroll the gear to your preference. Harlowe's 0-point action skill got a solid boost. Stasis slam damage is up 30%, making the follow-up hit harder. Enemies immune to stasis, like bosses, also take about 15% more damage, which helps with one of the issues I had when I played her. But one thing that is a bit annoying still is that once you start into the endgame, you're going to run into some issues against the variety of enemy types like Vials, so this isn't that impactful. But if you're a 0-point Harlowe main, then I'm sure you're happy. Rafa got a bit more focus than Harlowe. The Apophis Lance skill gains 10% damage overall, which is a pretty nice change, but isn't groundbreaking. All 3 capstones in the blue tree got buffed as well. Project Raiju damage now scales by 12% per second, which is a 2% increase. Project Basilisk had its damage increased by 15% and got a 25% increase to hazard damage. Lastly, Project Gorgon got a flat 17 damage increase. Seems like Gearbox felt that the skills themselves could see an increase in pick rate if they started hitting harder. For passives, El Katrine got a 1% increase to crit damage and bonus shock damage per point, with Per My Last receiving a 1% increase to the double damage chance. At first glance, this doesn't seem like enough to make me want to switch away from my Peacebreaker build, but it does make me wonder if I should try Apophis Lance out a little bit more. The green tree also got some love, with the Arc Knives getting a 12% damage increase and a 5% increase to dash damage. A bunch of the skills got buffed too. Handshake deals damage per point went from 7% to 9%, to the last skills damage increased from 6 to 8% per point, and El Paragus got a 2% increase to splash damage per point. Liquidation got a 50% damage increase, meaning the marked enemies you kill leave a much deadlier corrosive hazard. Collaborative Ignition got a 2% increase to bonus damage per point. Synergia got a 2-second duration increase on top of a 1% melee damage increase per point. And lastly, Empuje extends action skill duration by an extra 1% per point. I've seen some crazy melee builds with Rafa, so this may make me want to try that out. Does this mean the blue and green trees are going to outshine the red tree with the Peacebreakers? Probably not, but for people who enjoy these trees, this feels like a nice marginal buff and not necessarily something groundbreaking. Surprisingly, we're not going to see any nerfs to Vex, especially her bleeds, given how broken they are right now. But actually, we're going to get some pretty noticeable buffs across both her green and red trees and skills. On the Incarnate side, Phase Explosion damage is getting a 16.6% damage increase, while the Eldritch Blast damage is going up 9.5%. I've always found myself enjoying her skills more than her action skill itself on the green side, so hopefully this helps balance out the reasoning for picking this setup. The capstones each got buffed as well. Heart Piecer is getting a 22% damage increase, Desecration's hazard damage is increased by 50%, and Airborne Burst damage is up 48%. Geist Wave's damage sees a 41% increase as well. 3 of the passives are getting tweaked. Radiant Attunement now deals an additional percent of splash damage, Dreadlight's hazard damage is up 100%, and Ars Arcana gets an extra percent of skill damage. Trouble, Vex's feline companion, is thankfully getting some buffs as well, with damage increasing 21.9% and overall health up 10%. Violent Outburst damage is up 12.5%, and Vorpal Fang's damage is now 34% higher. The Here Comes Trouble bubble damage is now up 33%. A couple passives from Here Comes Trouble got buffed as well. Blood is Magic now increases action skill damage 1% per point. Claw and Bang ups melee damage 2% per point as well. And the last buffs are in the 4th Seal's passive. Fell Inscriptions gets an extra percent of melee damage per point. Recurrence increases melee damage by 0.2% up from 0.16% per point. And Haruspeck's Phase's dagger damage is up 11.7%. Now here's where we get into the biggest changes of this patch, which is the Amon buffs. Starting with Scourge, maximum vengeance has been increased by 50%, which means Amon can absorb a lot more damage and unleash much stronger stronger attacks when consuming Vengeance with Forge Whip. Speaking of Forge Whip, its damage got a 27% boost, giving Scourge builds a lot more viability in endgame. His Vengeance augments also saw significant improvements. Blast Chill damage is up 45%, Molten Rebuke now hits 86% harder, Eternal Winter's massive Forge Wave damage is doubled, Storm Lance increased by 52%, and Storm Lance Detonation got a 10% boost. Capstones weren't left behind either. Glacial Rapture now has a 60-second cooldown, down from 70, with Forge Whip damage up 16%, Fissure damage up 41%, and Wrathfall increasing 46%. His Vengeance passives also received notable upgrades, with Scourge Kairos increasing ordnance damage by 6% per point, Battleborn increasing gun damage by 4% per point, Scar Tissue boosting maximum health and rep kit healing by 9%, Eternal extends action skill duration by 5%, Worldbreaker damage increased by 50%, Winter's Kiss boosts damage by 10%, and Strike the Anvil now deals 15% of damage dealt. As you can see, they went above and beyond for Amon mains. And this is just for Scourge. Crucible builds got a boost too. Forge Axe damage increased 12%, Double Edge's twin Forge Axe got 10% more damage, augments like Axe and Stone's action skill cooldown and Ordnance Restoration were increased from 33% to 40%. Endless War gun damage taken per prime stack went up from 15% to 20%, while Hour of the Hammer Forge Hammer damage went up 14%, and Blade Tempest Forge Sword damage was increased 13%, with detonation damage up 4%. Capstones like Snowmaul saw 38% more damage, Storm Surge's Forge Storm went up 60%, and Conflingerang's Firetail damage was doubled. Passives such as Gathering Storm, Executioner, and Destruction Engine all saw per point increases to elemental, critical, and skill damage, and specific abilities like Tempered Pyre, Ice, and Lightning Forge weapons were buffed 13 to 19%. Onslaughter and Calamity received some of the biggest quality of life improvements. Onslaughter's shield regeneration went from 10% to 15% per second, Rocket Punch damage increased 78%, and Molten Slam now has a 60-second cooldown with 50% more damage. Calamity's Horror Cleave cooldown dropped from 65 seconds to 55 seconds, with 11% higher damage and an 18% detonation increase. Molten Royal and Stormcutter cooldowns were also reduced, with Stormcutter damage up 65%. Passives across these trees, including Heavy Plate, Wield the Storm, Tritanium Knuckles, Harbinger, and Mortal Flare, were tuned to increase shields, melee, skill, and status effect damage. Judgment now boosts melee damage by 10% up from 8%. The end result is that Amon feels significantly more powerful, flexible, and rewarding. Almost every action skill, augment, capstone, and passive received meaningful buffs. Honestly, any player now can run melee heavy builds, ordnance or elemental combos, or hybrid approaches both in the story and endgame. When Borderlands was first getting teased, Amon was the most intriguing character to me, but once I got my hands on the game, he kind of felt boring. I'm really hoping that these buffs bring him to the forefront for Vault Hunter selection. If you're still looking for the crit knife and don't know where to look, check out the video on the left. To get caught up on the entire Borderlands story, the video on the right is perfect for you.